Hey there, Maverick. I'm so glad you're here. This is episode 5, so let's dig into big dreams, bold moves, and the million lessons along the way. This is our check-in, just you and me crafting and claiming the life that is fully yours. These last couple episodes, I've just started telling the story of my life. I'm sure through this podcast, I'll go into these stories more in depth. But I wanted to at least give a foundation of who I am, where I came from, and the pivotal moments that made me who I am today. I mentioned that when you see people on stage, oftentimes you see the finished product, but I'm always curious to ask about how did it start? Where did it start? Because I do feel like those foundational pieces truly shape the full picture of someone. So that's what I've been trying to share over these last couple of episodes. So feel free to go back to episode 2, 3, and 4 if you want to hear the earlier stories. But we are at the point to when I was in high school. In the last episode, I talked about how I lost my dad just a couple of weeks before high school started. And now I'm starting my senior year and navigating this new normal. I remember that I had this creative writing class, which was such a blessing that was the first class that I had that senior year. We had so much time to just write. I think it's funny because it was creative writing class, which was probably a pretty easy class for this teacher to teach because we'd walk in every day. She'd take attendance and then she'd just say, you have an hour to write. And we'd just write every day. And you could write about anything, stories or poems or anything you wanted. And the only assignment, the only grade was at the end of the year, we had to put together a binder of our best work and turn it in. And based on the number of submissions and the quality of our work, that was our final grade. So now I think back, that's kind of a unique way to have a class, but I am so grateful because during this time, I really got to journal and write and cry and just process losing my dad and what that meant to me, what the divorce meant to me, what raising my niece meant to me, and all the other pivots along the way, all the other roadblocks in this journey that I felt like only I had. I think it's easy when you're that age to think that everyone else's life is perfect and yours is the only one that has these bumps, which obviously isn't true, but that's always the lens we see things with, especially as a teenager. So I had time to write and just get out what I felt. It was the first time that I fell in love with writing and actually felt that I had some talent in it. I mentioned that I was never a good student, so that was such a blessing to see something that I had a gifting in, a creative gift in. The other class in high school that I just fell in love with was photography. My grandpa was actually an insurance agent. He owned his own insurance office, but he loved photography as well. And he turned part of his basement, kind of this closet area, into a dark room. So I grew up watching him do photography just for fun and smelling the chemicals of the dark room and seeing the red light and falling in love with that process. So in this photography lab that we had a dark room as well. It was actually our last year this high school was ever going to use this dark room. So we were encouraged to use up all the film, all the chemicals, anything that we wanted, all the paper, because it was being thrown away at the end of the year. Wow, what an incredible gift to just be able to spend that time. For me, it was truly therapy to spend that time in that dark room and just process literally pictures, but then also just all my emotions and just this world I was living in. I did move in with those 3 other roommates, and so I was living in a house full of guys, college guys, who thrived on parties, and the house was trashed and smelly. No one knew how to do a dish in that house except for me, but it brought some fun to this otherwise pretty heavy world. When I wasn't at school, I was working. I actually had 2 full-time jobs while in high school, paying for my rent, for my car insurance, for my senior photos, for my gas, for literally everything. And my 2 jobs, one was at Sears Portrait Studio in the mall. If anyone's ever been to a studio like that, they are pretty funny places. Everyone comes in with a coupon for $3.99 or $4.99 or maybe $6 if you're lucky. And that coupon gives them a package of hundreds of portraits. Those packages often look like 2 8x10s, 6 5x7s, 8 3x5s, and 100 wallets or something ridiculous. And we'd have 15 minutes to do 6 poses on 3 different backgrounds and then take them out and try to upsell them to $150. The model never really made sense to me. I kept thinking, why do you give $4 coupons if you want your average sale to be $150? But somehow we made it work. I was grateful for that job because it not only taught me more about photography and the actual structure of it through modules and trainings, but it also taught me sales. While there was no commission, it really did make me confident to ask what I needed because I knew that the average sale under my name went to corporate. So I was not afraid to ask for those sales, for those upgrades, to make some suggested selling based on the beautiful portraits that I took behind a fake snow background. But it really was a time that I learned how to work in a corporate job. My other job was at Perkins Family Restaurant. It's a place kind of like a Denny's or maybe an IHOP where it serves breakfast all day long, also lunch and dinner. But I was a waitress there. I'd often work the very early shifts, like the 5 a.m. Saturday and Sunday shifts, getting all those people traveling. It was right by the interstate, or the after church crowd. I loved waitressing because, again, it helped me work on my sales skills. It was fast paced. It was always action packed. When I think back, the reason why I loved waitressing was it was my first taste of entrepreneurship. Between my 2 jobs, they were very different. At Sears Portrait Studio, no matter how hard I worked, no matter how many portraits I took, no matter how loud these kids were crying or parents were yelling at them to smile for this family Christmas card, I always made the same amount of money. And at my waitressing job, I learned pretty quickly that the harder I worked, the more I smiled, the faster I walked, the more I suggested pie, my tips reflected my hard work. So while I kept both jobs for about 2.5 years, I always loved my waitressing job more because of that freedom that I had and the ownership that I have of the money I took home. So between working 2 jobs, both at about 40 hours a week, plus going to school full time, I was a photo editor of the newspaper and the yearbook, spending as much time as I could in those photography classes. Living with these 3 college guys, I had quite the interesting senior year. But the thing that I will remember most is my guidance counselor. I graduated back in 2003, and back then I feel like the moral of the story, the line we were all told, was that everyone goes to college or the military. Those are your 2 options if you want to be successful. Now, you could choose either one. They were both respectful, but you had to choose one of those 2 paths. Back then, I feel like the dialogue was, no one knows what they want to do. Just go to college, take generals, and at some point, you'll figure it out. You can always take out student loans, and at some point, you'll graduate with a degree and a career that you love. Now, being a little bit of a maverick, I didn't like that narrative. It didn't make sense to me to pay $25,000 a year for college, not knowing what I was going to do, and not knowing if a degree would ever be needed. So I remember going into my guidance counselor's office and just saying, I don't think college is for me. Now, quickly, she tried to clarify. So you don't think a 4-year college is for you? Maybe a trade school? Maybe a community college? And I said, no, I don't think college is for me at all. Again, she acted like I was speaking another language and just kept trying to convince me that I didn't say what I had just said. But I was sure. I just knew in my heart. I knew in my heart back from elementary school that I wasn't a good student. I knew in my heart from junior high that no matter how much charm I bring to these professors, they're not going to give me a grade that I need to move on to that next level. I knew in my heart from high school, from working hard, that I know how to make money and that I like making money. I love the challenge and solving the problems, and I knew that I could do it. I remember this counselor looked right at me and she said, if you don't go to college, you have very few career paths. they're probably going to look like McDonald's or being a stripper. I can't believe she said that to me. Nowadays, you could never say that to anyone. But she was trying to scare me a little bit, trying to shock me, trying to make me feel the weight of this decision of not going to college. But I told her, I said, I want to open my own photography business. I've been the photo editor, the newspaper and yearbook. I've been taking 5 classes right now, all about photography at school. I've also been working at a portrait studio. My grandpa's a photographer. I know how to make money. I know the business side from being a waitress. I know I can do this. She didn't believe in me at all. And I had to walk out of the office knowing that she was worried that I would fail. I don't know if she was worried that I would fail or that she was worried that the statistics of the school were going to look worse. I know on graduation, they love to announce that 100% of the students graduating are going to college or to the military, and I was going to mess up that statistic. I was graduating with a class of over 800 kids, and I still felt like I was the one responsible for messing up that statistic. I remember going to my photojournalism class and venting to my teacher there. His name was Mr. Keller, and he was the first one who really saw my photography talent, saw my work ethic, saw that I was there before school, after school, weekends, doing whatever it took to get the photos I needed done. And he believed in me. And that's all it took. I just needed one person to truly believe in me. And I remember at graduation, when I walked across the stage, Mr. Keller found me and he said, I'm going to be in my classroom next week cleaning some things up, and I want you to swing by. I agreed. He congratulated me, and I went on with graduation day. That next Monday, I stopped at my high school, went up to his classroom where I literally had a cabinet that he cleared out so I could use it as a locker, and he handed me a camera. It was a film camera that they had used for years, but because they were switching to digital the next year, they didn't have a use for it anymore. And he handed me this camera, and he said, don't tell anyone I gave this to you, but you're going to make an amazing photographer. That camera, that was probably going to go in a dumpster, changed everything. I knew I could do it. He knew I could do it. And that was enough. That was all I needed, was someone to believe in me and gave me that little nudge, that little wink saying, you got this. He truly changed the trajectory of my business and my life, and I'm forever grateful. I sent him an email a handful of years later to tell him what I was doing and to thank him. I never heard back. I should try again to reach out. Now it's been 20 years. I don't even know where he is today, but he made a bigger impact than he'll ever know. The next episode, I'll dive into how that business started and the bumps along starting that very first business. So fun to think about now. But until next time, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if you want to keep it going, you can always find me on Instagram at the Juliet Wright. Make sure to go out there and create, claim, and conquer the life you're here to live. And always remember, I have your back.